The Afghan sun rose slowly over the jagged ridges, turning the dust-filled sky into a pale wash of orange and gold. From their perch on the rocky hillside, the small team of American special operators scanned the valley below in tense silence. What should have been a routine hostage rescue had become something far more sinister. Sofia Ramirez, an explosive specialist attached to the unit, adjusted her binoculars and studied the open ground ahead. To an untrained eye, the valley floor looked like nothing more than fallow farmland. But Sofia knew better. The subtle mounds of dirt, the oddly spaced patches of withered grass, the unnatural stillness, it all screamed danger. 200 meters of open terrain separated the team from a cluster of mud-brick buildings on the far side. Somewhere inside that compound, 6 civilians were being held, 4 doctors and 2 nurses captured while escorting aid supplies through the province. Time was running out. Intelligence suggested they had less than 6 hours before the hostages would be executed in a brutal display for cameras. Lieutenant Commander John Mercer crouched beside Sofia, a folded map in his hands. His expression was grim, the kind of grim only leaders wear when they know their decisions might cost lives. "Talk to me, Ramirez," he said, voice steady despite the tension. "What are we looking at?" Sofia lowered her binoculars, exhaled slowly, and wiped the sweat from her brow. "Sir, this isn't some patchwork job. It's the most sophisticated minefield I've ever seen. Pressure plates, trip wires, command-detonated IEDs, layered together in overlapping kill zones. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing." The team had already seen the field claim lives. 3 vehicles destroyed, 8 Afghan soldiers killed in an earlier attempt to scout the route. Now the valley floor lay quiet, waiting for the next set of footsteps. Chief Robert Daniels, the team's grizzled senior enlisted man, muttered under his breath, "Looks like someone turned 20 years of lessons learned into one giant graveyard." He wasn't wrong. Years of conflict had taught the Taliban how to perfect their craft. Gone were the days of crude homemade bombs, fashioned from fertilizer and scrap metal. This was engineering, deliberate, precise, terrifying in its effectiveness. Drone footage confirmed it. Men with measuring tools, careful camouflage, even test detonations. Sofia swallowed the unease rising in her chest. She had trained for this: Navy school, Army courses, classified programs, where she had learned the anatomy of every device known to insurgents. But no amount of training could erase the fear of walking into a field where one wrong step could turn you into a memory. Mercer raised his binoculars and scanned the terrain himself. He could see it now, the unnatural lines, the deceptive cover, the way the ground seemed to funnel attackers toward specific lanes. "What's their play?" he asked quietly. Sofia hesitated, then spoke with the clarity of someone who had spent her career thinking like the enemy. "Sir, this minefield isn't just a barrier. It's a trap for the mind. They've built it to convince us that crossing is suicide. They want us to either charge in and die, or turn around and abandon the hostages." Silence settled over the group. The men shifted uneasily. Sergeant Michael Brooks, the team's point man, finally broke it. "So either way, they win." "Unless we find another way," Mercer said. His tone carried the weight of responsibility. "We've got 6 hours to get across. That's it." Sofia knew what that meant. Standard clearance procedures, slow, methodical, painstaking work, would take 12 to 16 hours at minimum. And that was with heavy engineering equipment they didn't have. Every eye turned back to her. Explosives disposal wasn't just her specialty. Out here, it was her burden alone. She let her gaze linger on the village across the valley. She pictured the terrified aid workers, civilians who had come to help and now faced death at the hands of militants. She thought of their families, waiting back home, never imagining their loved ones would be caught in a tactical puzzle designed to outwit the best soldiers in the world. For a long moment, Sofia said nothing. Then she squared her shoulders, steadied her breathing, and met Mercer's eyes. "Sir, there might be a way across, but it's not going to look like anything you'll find in a manual." Robert Daniels shook his head. "You're talking about walking into that field." "I'm talking about reading their pattern," Sofia replied firmly. "Every trap leaves a fingerprint. No one can mine every inch of a battlefield. They want us to move a certain way. If I can figure out what they're expecting, I can figure out where they left gaps. Michael Brooks let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a gamble. It's more than a gamble, Sophia said. She forced her voice to stay calm, though her heart hammered in her chest. It's the only chance those hostages have. Mercer stared at her for a long moment, his jaw set. He was weighing the risk, not just to Sophia, but to the entire team. Then he folded the map shut with finality. All right, he said. Show me what you see. The hillside wind carried dust across the ridge as Sophia Ramirez crouched over the tactical map, spread between her and Commander John Mercer. The rest of the team gathered close, their faces etched with a mix of skepticism and the grim patience of men who had seen too much war. The minefield below glared back at them, silent and merciless. Sophia pointed with her gloved hand to the valley floor. Look here, she began. Notice the way the vegetation thins out in straight lines? That's no accident. They're hurting us, trying to guide movement into predictable lanes. The deadliest devices will be concentrated in areas that make the most tactical sense: cover, concealment, and high ground advantage. Chief Robert Daniels squinted at the map, then at the field. He shook his head. That's textbook defensive engineering. They know we'll aim for the safest approach. You're saying they trapped the obvious routes? Sophia nodded. Exactly. Which means the areas that look most exposed might be the least defended. It's counterintuitive, but insurgent bomb makers don't have infinite resources. They had to make choices. They made this field terrifying on purpose, but terror itself is a weapon. Petty Officer Michael Brooks, always quick to doubt, leaned forward. So you're telling us the open ground, the places that scream death, that's where you want us to walk? Sophia met his eyes. I'm saying that the enemy assumes we won't, and assumptions can be exploited. A heavy silence followed. The men were trained to trust their doctrine, to use cover, to avoid exposure. Walking into the barest ground went against everything drilled into them. Yet something in Sophia's steady tone, the way she spoke with analytical certainty rather than guesswork, forced them to consider the unthinkable. Lieutenant Commander Mercer broke the silence. How long to prove your theory? Sophia's mind raced. She thought about her years of training, the countless hours studying enemy devices, the nights spent reviewing grainy surveillance footage of bomb makers at work. She thought about her deployments, the soldiers who hadn't made it home, the mistakes carved forever into her memory. This was the culmination of all of it. Give me 90 minutes, she said at last. I can chart a path, but I'll need to go first. Robert Daniels swore under his breath. You're volunteering to walk into that minefield alone. That's not courage, Ramirez. That's suicide. Sophia didn't flinch. Chief, I'm the only one trained to read this field. If I'm wrong, it ends with me. If I'm right, you'll have a safe lane to the hostages. Her words hung heavy in the dry air. The others exchanged glances, each silently weighing the gamble. They had seen men die from single missteps, entire patrols ripped apart by one buried charge. To entrust their lives to the judgment of one woman, no matter how skilled, demanded a level of faith most soldiers rarely granted. Mercer finally nodded, the decision landing like a stone. You'll have your 90 minutes. But if at any point you doubt, you call it. Understood? Yes, sir. Sophia began preparing immediately. She stripped her gear to essentials. No bulky sensors, no heavy packs. Instead, she relied on her eyes, her instincts, her hard-earned ability to spot what others missed. She selected chalk markers, small flags, and a simple probe. Her loadout favored speed and awareness over brute protection. As she checked her equipment, Medic Thomas Lee approached quietly. Sophia, he said, his voice low. I've seen you do things that didn't make sense until they worked. But this feels different. Are you sure? She met his concerned gaze. Tom, I've studied their engineers. They think like puzzles. Every trap has a weakness. This one does too. Someone just needs to find it before the clock runs out. He gave a faint nod, though his eyes betrayed worry. The team assembled along the ridge, watching as Sophia approached the valley's edge. The landscape stretched before her, 200 meters of killing ground, deceptively quiet, waiting. She could almost feel the eyes of enemy spotters hidden among the rocks and compounds beyond, hands ready over detonators. Her first step crunched softly against the dry soil. Every nerve in her body screamed danger, yet her mind forced discipline. She studied the ground with intensity, noting disturbed earth, unnatural lines in the sand, the faint shimmer of wires barely visible in the sunlight. Step by step, she pieced together the logic of the field. At 75 meters, her suspicions confirmed. The most dangerous-looking stretch, the barren, exposed corridor, contained remarkably few devices. To anyone else, it was suicide. To Sophia, it was the fingerprint of insurgent psychology. They believed no sane soldier would risk it, so they hadn't wasted resources there. She knelt, marking safe ground with chalk, flagging the edges of danger zones. Behind her, through scopes and binoculars, the SEALs watched in breathless silence. Brooks muttered, "She's actually doing it." Daniels shook his head, awe slowly replacing his doubt. "Or she's the luckiest damn Yoditech alive." But Sophia knew luck had nothing to do with it. Each step was a calculation, every pause a test of logic against fear. She was no longer just an engineer dismantling devices. She was a chess player inside the mind of her opponent. Halfway across, she froze. Ahead lay a cluster of devices arranged with chilling precision, an interlocking pattern of mines designed to punish anyone who found the first. A trap for the cautious. She studied it, breath held, until her trained eyes discovered the narrow corridor threading between kill zones. Marking it with care, she pressed forward. Minutes bled into an hour. The valley sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat stung her eyes. Yet step by step, she advanced. Finally, after 90 tense minutes, Sophia's voice crackled over the radio. "Team, this is Ramirez. I've reached the far side. Path is marked. Confirmed safe." Relief swept the ridge, like a gust of wind. Mercer exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Daniels whispered, almost reverently, "She made it." But Sophia knew this was only the beginning. The path was open, yes, but the most dangerous. Sophia Ramirez crouched low at the edge of her marked path, her gloved hands pressed against the warm dirt. The valley around her seemed unnaturally still, as though even the wind feared to disturb the silence. Behind her, across the 200 meters of carefully charted depth, the SEAL team waited. They trusted her markers, her judgment, her instincts. But trust would mean nothing if she failed now. She studied the ground ahead, and her pulse quickened. Something was wrong. The last stretch of the minefield, no more than 30 meters to the safety of the compound wall, appeared too perfect. The soil was smooth, unbroken, almost inviting. After hours of treacherous progress, it looked like salvation, an open lane to freedom. But Sophia knew better. Nothing in this field was by accident. She lowered her gaze, searching for what wasn't there. No faint wires, no unnatural bumps, no hints of disturbed vegetation. It was spotless, too spotless, and that absence itself was a warning. The enemy had saved their masterpiece for last. Her voice came low over the radio. "Commander, the final stretch is compromised." From the ridge, John Mercer's tone was tense. "Compromised how? I don't see anything." "That's the point," she replied. "It's meant to look safe. This section is the densest trap yet. They want anyone who survives the crossing to relax, to think they've made it. That's when they strike." Chief Daniels cursed softly into the comms. Hell of a cruel trick. Sophia adjusted her goggles, narrowing her focus. The logic of the field became clear. The Taliban engineers had layered their defenses in waves, the psychological terror of the exposed ground, the cunning funnel traps halfway through, and now the final deception, a killing ground designed to annihilate anyone who let down their guard at the finish line. She shifted carefully to the left, brushing her probe into the soil. A sharp metallic scrape confirmed her suspicion. A pressure plate, shallow, waiting for the slightest weight. A meter ahead, another. Then another, interlocking like teeth in a jaw. "This entire section is seeded," she whispered. "It's meant to break morale and ensure no one leaves alive." From his vantage, Mercer clenched his jaw. The timeline loomed over them. The hostages' lives ticked away with every second. They had no time to backtrack, no option to clear methodically. The only way forward was through, and the only person who could carve that path was already in the field. Sophia steadied her breathing. Her training told her this was madness. Her instincts told her this was the test she had been preparing for her entire career. She remembered her first deployment, the look on a young private's face after stepping too close to a buried charge, the way fear could freeze men more effectively than bullets. She refused to let that happen here. "Commander," she said firmly, "there's a corridor. Narrow but real. I can see where the patterns overlap. If I thread it carefully, I can mark a safe exit." Mercer's reply was short. "Do it." Sophia moved forward with agonizing slowness, her probe brushing the soil, her eyes mapping invisible lines of danger. Every step felt like balancing on a razor's edge. To her left, pressure plates glinted faintly beneath thin layers of dust. To her right, buried trip wires led toward clusters of hidden charges. She imagined the engineers who had placed them, men with steady hands and cold patience, smiling at the thought of anyone daring to cross. But Sophia thought like them too. She had lived in their world, studied their tricks, memorized their psychology. Where others saw chaos, she saw intention. And where there was intention, there were limits. At the 20-meter mark, sweat soaked her undershirt. Her heart hammered, but her focus never wavered. She marked the corridor with chalk and flags, each placement a promise of survival for those who would follow. Behind her, the SEALs watched through optics, barely daring to breathe. Michael Brooks muttered to no one in particular, "She's not just reading the field, she's outsmarting it." Daniels crossed his arms tightly. "If she pulls this off, I'll buy her a drink every day for the rest of my life." Finally, Sophia reached the far wall of the compound. She pressed her back against the sun-baked mud brick and let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. 90 minutes of tension released in a rush. She raised her radio. "Team, this is Ramirez. Path is complete. Markers are set. You're clear to cross." For a moment, silence. Then Mercer's voice came, steady but edged with relief. "Copy that. Team, move on her line. Weapons up, eyes open. Follow her trail exactly." From her position, Sophia watched as the SEALs began their crossing. One by one, they stepped into the path she had carved, their movements careful, precise, yet filled with the urgency of men racing against death. Chalk markers glowed faintly in the sun, guiding them through what had once seemed impassable. Not a single detonation sounded. No plume of dirt, no thunder of explosives. The field remained silent, defeated by analysis sharper than steel. 25 minutes later, the entire team stood beside her unscathed. Relief rippled through them, quiet but profound. They had beaten the impossible. Mercer clapped Sophia lightly on the shoulder, his voice low but sincere. "You just turned a suicide mission into a rescue. Let's finish this." She nodded, her gaze shifting to the compound where hostages waited behind barred doors and armed guards. The minefield was conquered, but the battle was far from over. As the team readied their weapons and stacked along the wall, Sophia glanced once more at the valley they had crossed. To others, it would forever be remembered as a death trap. To her, it was proof that even the most terrifying puzzles could be solved with courage, precision, and the willingness to take the first step. But deep inside, she knew one truth. The hardest part had only just begun. The mud brick wall loomed in front of them, its weathered surface cracked from years of harsh Afghan sun. Behind it, somewhere in the tangle of narrow courtyards and low-roof structures, 6 hostages waited for a fate darker than death. Sophia Ramirez pressed her back against the wall, still steadying her breathing from the minefield crossing. Her part had been to open the door through fire and earth. Now the rest of the team had to storm through it. Lieutenant Commander John Mercer raised a clenched fist, signaling silence. The SEALs froze in formation, their weapons angled low but ready. He glanced at his watch. Less than 5 hours remained before the intelligence deadline, the hour the captors planned to stage their execution for the world to see. Chief Robert Daniels leaned in close, his gravel-rough voice just above a whisper. Thermal scans showed at least a dozen fighters inside, probably more tucked away in shadows. Mercer nodded. "That's manageable. Quiet entry, fast push. We don't give them time to touch the hostages. His eyes flicked to Sophia. You stay with us. If they've rigged the compound the same way they did the field, we'll need your eyes. Sophia gave a short nod. Her instincts already screamed caution. If the enemy had spent weeks engineering the minefield, they had surely thought about what waited inside these walls. The team moved with surgical precision. Michael Brooks and David Chin eased forward, setting a small charge at a weakened section of the wall. A muffled thud followed, just enough force to crumble the clay, without broadcasting across the valley. Dust rose in a pale cloud as a gap opened wide enough for entry. Stack up, Mercer ordered. One by one, they slid inside. The first courtyard lay in eerie quiet, the air heavy with the scent of dust and smoke. Sophia scanned quickly, shadows of wires near the doorway, a suspicious mound of dirt against the wall. She raised a hand. Stop. Booby trap. Daniel swore softly. Told you. Sophia crouched, tracing the thin copper line, stretched at ankle height. It connected to a crude pressure trigger hidden beneath the dirt. A single misstep would have turned the entryway into an inferno. With practiced movements, she severed the line and signaled clear. The team pressed on. Courtyard after courtyard, they advanced, weaving through narrow alleys. The compound was a labyrinth, deliberately designed to disorient intruders. Fighters appeared from doorways, rifles flashing. The SEALs answered with disciplined bursts, dropping enemies before they could retreat. Sophia kept to the middle of the formation, eyes darting constantly. Twice more she caught traps, an IED disguised as a cooking pot, a hidden charge wired into a stairwell. Each time she disarmed them quickly, her calm hand steady even as adrenaline surged. They reached the central building at last, a two-story structure with shuttered windows and a reinforced door. Faint voices echoed from within, muffled cries of hostages mixed with harsh commands in another tongue. Mercer raised two fingers, then pointed to Brooks. The point man nodded, set a breaching charge, and stepped back. The explosion shattered the door, with splintering as the team poured inside. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunfire rattled from the stairwell. Shouts echoed through the rooms. The hostages screamed. Sophia pressed against the wall, her weapon tight in her grip. Though she wasn't a frontline assaulter, years of training kept her steady. She followed Daniels through a side corridor, heart pounding, as the firefight spread. Upstairs, Michael Brooks cleared a room with a thunder of gunfire. Two fighters fell, their weapons clattering to the floor. Another rushed from a doorway, detonator in hand, but Chin shot him down before his thumb could press the trigger. Hostages on me. Daniel's voice bellowed through the dust. Sophia rushed after him into a dim chamber. 6 figures huddled on the floor, bound and terrified, their faces lit with sudden hope as the Americans burst in. Emma Lawson, one of the doctors, sobbed in relief. Daniels cut the bindings quickly. You're safe. Stay low, stay behind us. But safety was far from guaranteed. Outside the chamber, enemy reinforcements surged, their shouts echoing as boots thundered on the stairwell. The SEALs formed a protective wall, exchanging fire with deadly precision. Bullets sparked against walls, splinters flying. Sophia kept the hostages pressed to the floor. Don't move unless I say, she whispered, her own body shielding them. Every sound was amplified, the thud of boots, the hiss of bullets, the pounding of her own heartbeat. Mercer's voice cut through the chaos. Extraction point, northwest wall. We punch out fast. Daniels nodded, then turned to Sophia. Lead the way. If they bury charges near the exit, you'll see them before anyone else. Her throat tightened, but she gave no hesitation. Follow my markers. Stay tight. The team began the exfiltration, moving the hostages in a shield of bodies. Sophia scanned every corner, every doorway, expecting wires or traps. Twice she caught glimpses of danger, an oddly stacked pile of crates, a wire looped across an alley. Each time, she redirected them with silent signals. The compound seemed to fight them with every step. Gunfire chased them. Shouts rang from rooftops. Grenades exploded in courtyards behind. Yet they pressed forward, discipline and training carrying them through. Finally, the northwest wall rose ahead, cracked and weakened like the one they had entered. Brooks planted another charge. Fire in the hole. The blast tore open the wall, sunlight streaming in. Dust clouded the air, but beyond lay open ground leading to the ridge. Mercer's voice was sharp. Move. Move. One by one, the hostages were pushed through, stumbling into freedom. The SEALs followed, weapons firing in controlled bursts to cover their retreat. Sophia stayed until the last, ensuring no trap waited at the threshold. They emerged into the harsh sun, breaths ragged, uniforms coated in dust. Behind them, the compound burned with smoke and chaos. Ahead, the open valley stretched, their marked path waiting like a lifeline back to safety. For the first time in hours, Sophia let herself believe it might actually be possible. They had crossed the field. They had broken the compound. Now only one task remained, getting everyone out alive. The valley blazed with light as the midday sun climbed high, beating down on scorched earth and broken stone. Smoke curled behind the team, rising from the battered compound where hostages had been freed and enemy fighters lay defeated. But victory meant little if they could not escape. The minefield still stretched between them and safety, a silent predator waiting to claim anyone careless enough to falter. Sofia Ramirez wiped sweat from her brow, her pulse quick but steady. 6 aid workers stood close together, their faces pale and dust-streaked. They clung to one another, bewildered by the violence they had just witnessed. Beside them, the SEALs formed a protective circle, weapons sweeping the ridgelines. Enemy spotters could still be hidden, waiting for their moment to strike. Lieutenant Commander John Mercer crouched beside Sophia, voice low and urgent. "We've bought time, but not much. Reinforcements will be coming. We need to cross now." Sophia's gaze drifted back to the path she had carved, faint chalk marks and colored flags barely visible against the dusty earth. That narrow corridor was the only reason they stood here alive. But moving a team of hardened operators was one thing. She now had 6 terrified civilians to shepherd across a battlefield designed to kill. "We go single file," she said, her tone firm. "They follow my markers exactly. No one steps an inch off the line. If they panic, they die." Chief Robert Daniels gave her a sharp nod. "You lead. We'll keep them tight." Sophia turned to the hostages. Their wide eyes met hers. She softened her tone. "I know you're scared. But listen to me. Every step I take, you take. Don't look left, don't look right. Just keep your eyes on my back, and you'll see your families again. Do you understand?" They nodded, some trembling, others whispering prayers. With a deep breath, Sophia stepped onto the first marker. The earth seemed to hold its breath with her. Behind, the civilians followed, clutching one another, guided by Daniels and Brooks. The SEALs fanned out along the corridor, weapons ready, scanning the hills. The crossing began. Every step echoed with danger. Sophia's boots landed with the precision of a surgeon's hand, each placement deliberate. She replayed her earlier analysis in her mind, remembering which areas concealed pressure plates, which routes were deceptive dead ends. Her eyes darted constantly, ensuring the marks remained visible. At 75 meters, a sudden crack split the air, rifle fire from the ridge. Dust spat near their feet. The hostages screamed, huddling instinctively. "Contact left." Brooks barked, returning fire with sharp bursts. Bullets snapped overhead, the valley exploding with chaos. "Keep them moving," Mercer shouted. Sophia forced her voice calm, steady. "Eyes on me. One step at a time." The civilians obeyed, clinging to her rhythm. Step, breathe, step. Behind them, the SEALs laid down precise fire, cutting down figures that darted from cover. The enemy had not expected their trap to be beaten, and their disarray gave the Americans a narrow edge. At the halfway mark, Sophia's chest tightened. Ahead lay the corridor of lies, the dense cluster of mines she had threaded earlier. One misstep now would destroy them all. She crouched, tracing her earlier chalk marks, verifying each flag. Dust had blown across some of them, faint and nearly invisible. She wiped clear the line with her hand, then rose. "Stay close," she whispered. One by one, they passed through, her heart hammering with each terrified footfall. A hostage stumbled, nearly losing balance, but Daniels caught him, holding him steady without letting him stray off the safe path. The firefight raged, but the team pressed on, determination outweighing fear. Sweat drenched Sophia's back, her focus razor-sharp. 90 minutes of analysis, hours of training, 6 years of experience, all funneled into these few steps that would decide life or death. At last, the far edge of the field neared. The ridge stood waiting, sunlight gleaming on the rocks where they had first observed this valley of death. Freedom was only meters away. "Almost there," Sophia called, her voice hoarse but strong. The hostages stumbled across the final markers, collapsing onto safe ground with sobs of relief. One woman dropped to her knees, pressing her hands to the dirt as though it were sacred. The SEALs followed, each man crossing in disciplined rhythm until the last boots stepped off the field. Not a single detonation sounded, not one life lost. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Chief Daniels exhaled a heavy breath and muttered, "By God, she did it." Mercer looked at Sophia, his expression a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You just beat the impossible." Sophia allowed herself a small, weary smile. "No, sir. We just understood it." Extraction helicopters thundered into the valley minutes later, rotor blades chopping the hot air. Dust swirled as the team loaded the hostages aboard, covering the retreat with disciplined fire. As the aircraft lifted skyward, the valley shrank beneath them. The minefield, the compound, the battlefield that had nearly swallowed them whole. On the flight back, Sophia sat quietly, exhaustion pressing down on her. Daniels leaned across the aisle, his grizzled face softening for once. "What you did out there wasn't luck. It was genius. You saved us all." She shook her head. "Luck's just preparation meeting opportunity. The rest was necessity." Weeks later, in the safety of Fort Belvoir, Sophia's method became doctrine. Analysts studied her path through the Helmand Valley. Instructors taught her techniques to new EOD specialists. What soldiers once called suicide became a case study in how to outthink fear itself. The Torres method, as some would later call it, spread across battlefields worldwide, though Sophia herself cared little for the name. To her, it was never about glory. It was about the 6 aid workers who lived, the teammates who made it home, and the quiet truth that sometimes the most dangerous path was the only way forward. The valley would be remembered as a place of death, but for Sophia Ramirez, it became something else, a reminder that knowledge, courage, and a single first step could carve a road through hell. And sometimes, against all odds, that road led home.